Okay, so the goal for today is to be able to pull the data out of the transaction system and build it into the data warehouse. There are several different kinds of things we'll have to do to accomplish this. We'll do it all inside of Visual Studio. So we are choosing File, New Project, File, New Project, New Project. And if we've got this, what was it called, John? SQL Server SSDT, what was the? SQL Server Data Tools. If you downloaded the SQL Server Data Tools and installed them, then you should have this group here, Business Intelligence, and we're on this one called Integration Services, and we are doing the Integration Service Project. If you want to know what all the rest of this stuff is, you have to ask somebody who knows. I don't know. I just haven't had time to play with it yet. Literally, the first project I ever created in Visual Studio is this project that we're doing today. And I use the term completed loosely because I haven't quite completed it yet. But I think it's more than we'll be able to cover today. All right. All right, so hopefully that'll bring something up for us to look at. It doesn't look familiar yet. It's looking a little more familiar. Getting started with that. Okay, very good. All right, so it brings us up something over here called SSIS packages. And so this is what we're on right now. We're on package.dtsx. Don't know what that stands for, but this is our canvas. This is where we're going to work on things. And so there's really kind of three different sets of scripts that we're going to have to create to manage the data warehouse. One, we're starting from scratch. We don't even have the data warehouse, anything built for the data warehouse. And so our first task is going to be able to build a package that will build the data warehouse structure that we need. Then we're going to have a set of scripts that actually bring in the first set of data. And that's going to be a different set of scripts than kind of what we have to do to update the data periodically. And so that's our task. So we're going to go ahead and start off with seeing what does it take to create the data warehouse structure. All right, so I'm going to begin by getting some connections built. So down here I've got this connection manage. Manag. I'll right-click, and we'll use a new OLADB connection. And so this is going to allow us to get connected to Microsoft SQL Server. I already have two defined here. You probably don't have any defined here. So let me go ahead and delete these. Delete. Okay. So we have none here, and I'll say new. Okay, so let's start off by establishing our connection to where the data currently exists. And these are the parameters for that. And that's looking, are you guys, can you see this okay up there? That's okay? Oh, good, wonderful. All right, so the server name is going to be websql.byu.edu, 5901. So the SQL server that runs Web SQL, which is where the transaction data are, is listening on port 5901. So that's what the 5901 means. The default port for SQL Server is, anyone know? 1433. Did you know that? I was curious if you knew that. So you don't have to put the port if it's the default port. We're going to use SQL Server Authentication. And their shared credentials. If you remember your credentials back in the day of working with Web SQL, those credentials will work. But if you don't, then you can use the Chicago user credentials, CHICAGO _user. Password is Leroy _Brown, all lowercase. Is there anyone here who doesn't know who Leroy Brown is? Really? Yeah, there's a song. You don't want to sing it for us? Bad. You can omit the swearing part, though. Bad Leroy Brown, baddest man in the whole darn town. Anyway, starts off the south side of Chicago is the baddest part of town. Something about a guy named Leroy Brown. Okay, save password. That's where the password comes from.
So that's a Leroy Brown?
Leroy _Brown. LEROY _Brown, all lowercase. Okay, now if we've got those credentials, is that right? Yes. So we should be able to select a database here. If it doesn't give you a list of databases to choose from, your credentials aren't correct because it's trying to authenticate and ask which databases we have access to, and we'll choose the Web SQL database. And that should do it. Say OK, and we've got that connection. Was there an option to test it? I didn't mean right-click, new OLADB connection. So we've got the one. Okay, second connection then that we need. So this is our source. This is going to be our source connection. We will also need a connection that's going to be our data warehouse connection. And that server is data.websql.org. That's running on port 1433, the default, so you don't need to specify that. We'll use SQL Server Authentication, and then here's where you need the credentials that I emailed to you on Monday. So for me, it's user1 group 0 and some password that I do not know. I'm about to record my password. I got to look it up. I'm going to pause. Okay, so I put in my username and my password. I'll go ahead and save the password. That's probably really insecure for some reason. And hopefully, yeah, that will give me, now the database here is called user data. So the data where you have access to, the database you have access to is called user data. And that should be good. That should give you the connection to where we're each building your copy of the data warehouse. And we'll, is there a test button? Yeah. Test connection succeeded. Thank you. And of course, if it gave us the list of databases to choose from, we know we've already talked to the database. But it is kind of nice and comforting to say that it succeeded. All right, so given those two connections, we're feeling pretty good about life. I think we have a recording already. So that's the button that says, pause it if we. Thanks. But please remind me, if I pause it and forget to turn it back on. All right, so now we've got these two database connections. This is the main thing that we're going to need to use. Now for this first script, in fact, why don't we go ahead and change the name of this package. Instead of just package.d, whatever that stands for, I'm going to change the name to, let's call it create DW. Create the data warehouse. And then we'll use this canvas here to establish all of our tasks. I changed this right here. This used to say package something. And I just changed the name because we're going to have a couple of packages here. We're going to have one that creates it and then one that brings the data in. How we doing, folks? All right. So these are the two main tools that we use. It's a data flow task and just an execute structured query language task. So here we're just going to be building some tables. And so we'll use execute structured query language task. I'll just double click that. And it will bring on a block for me. Now, here's the thing, is that if I try to execute a structured query language statement and it fails, then our code's just going to stop. Presumably, there's some way to tell it to go try something else if it fails. I don't know how to do that yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the create table statements that we write aren't going to have collisions because the tables already exist. Trouble is, you can't just delete the table because the table doesn't already exist. That will give you an error as well. But we can overcome that one. So I'm going to name this task. So instead of just, this is actually the default name, execute SQL task. I'm going to change that to drop tables. So that's just the name for this SQL task. And then I'll double click it to bring up the parameters for it. Okay, so there's a bunch of options here that I have no idea what they mean, but the one we need here is connection. So this connection says we have two database connections already established. It doesn't know which one to use. And so we've got to tell it this is going to be at our destination connection, so our data.websql.org. So we'll pull from the drop-down list, and there should be the two to choose from. Make sure you choose the data one that has your username on And now we need a bunch of structured query language statements. Fortunately, we'll be able to copy and paste rather than type these. So somewhere I have Learning Suite open. And so we've got this one called createdw.txt. And this first block is the drop table section. So this first little query here is just saying, hey, if this thing exists, it's checking to see if there actually is an object ID that meets these criteria. So it has that name. The table we're dropping here is called temp inspection. And we're going to have to modify this to make sure that it's your own user, because these are going to be created in your own user space. So probably a good idea to just copy this whole first block, take it to a text editor, and then just do a find and replace for user1 group 0 and change that to what your username is. And then we'll just bring this script in, and we'll put that as the structured query language statement. Are you still working on getting those statements, or do you have them? Still working on them? Okay. Once you have them, kind of look up at me with a very satisfied look on your face. No, you're ready to go. Nate, that wasn't satisfied. That was kind of disdainful.
Does case matter in the username?
Case should not matter in the username. So when you have that, so there's really only two things that we need to configure here on this run structured query language block. One is the connection to run it against, and then the SQL statement that we're going to execute. And so we'll click on the little builder for that, and it will bring up a window where we can just paste that script in. Then we'll say OK, and we should be done with that particular task. And so now we've got this first one, it's ready to execute. I mean, it's pretty simple. We're just running one script. And the way that we execute this is with the little start button up here. We'll just click play, and that should tell us, yeah, we're trying to execute this, and hopefully it'll tell us it's successful. So it kind of takes us into this separate view that's kind of showing the process of going through. And if you get a green check mark here, it means that script executed. Did it delete any tables? For me, it probably did, because I had a bunch of them there this morning. But for you, it probably didn't, but still should go through and say it executed OK. All right, then when we're done here, click on the red X, and that will stop us. That'll take us back into our design view. Okay, now I'm going to need several more drop table, or several more execute structured query language task blocks. And since they're all going to execute against the same database connection, instead of making a new one from here, I'm just going to copy this one, just Control-C, Control-V. And that way my connection will already be set up, and all I have to do is change the structured query language statement. So this one will be the next step in our query, the next block. So I've got a block that's creating what we need to handle the inspection type. So I will call this create inspection type. And before we paste this in, let's take a look at what we're doing here. So in order to be able to deal with the inspection type, this might actually be helpful for us to look at the data before we just kind of blindly work with this structured query language. So let me pull up the data. So I'm just going to go to websql.org and use those same credentials, Leroy Brown, to get logged in. And let me select, what is this, the inspection type? Select star from inspection. And because this user is not the owner of the data, we're going to have to prefix it with Chicago. So Chicago dot. It's not critical that you actually do this part along with me, but just be able to take a look at it. So what we're getting ready to deal with is we're getting ready to deal with this inspection type data. So each inspection has information about kind of what led to the inspection. So was it a complaint? Was it just renewing the license? There are various other things here. I have no idea what Canvas, spelled with 2 S, is. What that even means in their system. I just don't know. But that's a kind of inspection. It's like what led the person to go out there and actually inspect. So there are lots of different values here. So let's just take a quick look at it. Select distinct. Inspection type. This will show us all the different kinds. Just looking at it, it looks like there's only a handful. But when we say select, oops, no parentheses for distinct. There's a lot of them. There's 95 different ones. And it turns out most of these, yeah, there's only just a few. So this is really gonna require some cleanup to get this to where it's uniform. There's one called error save. I don't think that's really a kind of inspection. So instead of doing distinct here, let's go ahead and find out how many of each of these we have. So I'm going to select count star and inspection type and grouping by inspection type. And that should show us how many of each we have. Thank you. And let's go ahead and order by count star. So we've got 6,000 of this type canvas, or 63,000 of this type canvas, 15,000 of this type license, and then we get down to a bunch where there's just one of that. And so this is going to require some work. This is going to require some of the ETL. Which one are we talking about? Yeah, this is transform. So the raw data coming in, it's not going to be what we need. We're going to have to transform it. And so what we're doing here then in this, is this where I want to be? It's not really where I want to be. That's fine. So what we're doing here is we're creating a structure that's going to prepare us to be able to deal with this data. And so I've got 3 tables that I'm creating here. One is going to be the ultimate dim table that I'm going to need. Another one is going to be a temp table that's going to allow me to bring this data in and yet still be able to modify it after it comes in. So a temp table. And then one that's going to be a mapping table that's going to allow me to map from, what I'll have to do is I'm going to have to choose which of these I want to keep, and how am I going to map from, let's see. And part of the trouble here is we don't even really know what that's supposed to be. But look, they've got exactly one that's called License Task 1474. There seems to be something with some kind of liquor task force. I don't think that one's right either. There's only one of those. We come up here and there's several hundred. It's called Task Force Liquor 1475. I think both of those that we just looked at really should be categorized this way. We don't have the ability to change the source data. And so what we've got to do is we've got to say that source data comes in as it is, and we're going to need to be able to map some way to be able to say, look, if in the source data it says license task 1474, we're really going to map that to this task force liquor 1475. So that's what these tables then are for. And so that's what this transform inspection type is going to be for. See, we're going to have the original description, and then we're going to allow that to map to a particular description that we'll use. All right, so these 3 tables are what I'm going to need to be able to manipulate the inspection type. And so I'm going to put those into what gets created by this inspection type structured query language task. Because I copied my prior drop tables statement or task, my connections are already configured. I just have to overwrite the structured query language. And then I'm good to go. Now, it turns out that as soon as I have two tasks, we have to ask which one of them is going to get run first. And the answer is, if I don't put any sequencing on this, they are going to launch simultaneously. And so it will run a lot of this stuff in parallel. And that's a problem, because I'm counting on these tables being dropped here before I create them here. And so I'm going to create a path dependency here by selecting the one I want to go first and then dragging the arrow to the one that I want to follow. By connecting that arrow up, it's going to say do this one, and when that one is done, do this one. Questions? Okay, we've got several more tables to create, and it's going to be pretty much more of the same. So I've got them kind of spaced out in blocks. So here's a dim establishment. This just has the information that we're going to need for the establishment. I'm actually collapsing. Get to Learning Suite and also bring up the image. That's the image. Let me slide it up. So this image is somewhere in Learning Suite, but I've got it open already here. So from establishment, what we're going to see is that I've actually collapsed everything above establishment down into the establishment dimension. And so we've got things in this query that don't depend directly to the establishment, because we've got information about the business owner that's sitting over here. That's ultimately going to get collapsed down into this dimension. And so this information about the business owner is going to be here in this table.
Question.
Yes?
Why would you just put all of your create table statements into one process?
Oh, question is, why not just put all the create table statements into one process? And the answer is, you could totally do that. We got all the drop table statements in one. In fact, we could put all the drops and all the creates into one. It's not so much that it's easier to read, but while I'm developing, so this process is going to seem, pretty much, this process is going to feel very linear to you, because I've kind of worked through this example. But, I mean, look at this. Do you think I got this table right the first time I created it? Yeah, nowhere close. And so, I would create the table, I'd bring the data in, and go, oh my gosh, I got to go back and do something different with the owner ID. And because I have this, I'll have this isolated in its own task. Here, I'm going to go ahead and let's copy this task. And modify the query. And give it a name. What is this one? This is the establishment. Create establishment. You're working for the establishment now. Working for the man. Okay. And it pays well. The man pays well. Okay, so it turns out that if I go to run this, it's going to run all these things, unless I disable some of these tasks. And so because I've got this one isolated here, I can disable this one, and now I can just, if I run this, it's only going to run that create establishment task. So that's another reason to separate them out into different tasks, is because I can say, well, I might want to run that without running all the rest of them, and I can then just disable it.
If you run that again, you get an error.
Yeah, if I run this again, it should give an error, because it's going to try to create the table that already exists. And so I get an X here, and it's itty-bitty. I can't even see it. Package execution completed with error. Click here to see something more about the error. And presumably this will tell you somewhere that it says it exists. Executing the query create table dim establishment. Failed with the following error. There is already an object named establishment.
But if you
Yeah, John.
but if you run the first one like the dropping one, sometimes it won't turn up.
Yeah, the dropping one won't error out because the script itself has if statements that it only tries to drop the table if it exists. And of course, it's pretty easy to drop. So, instead of having, all these drop table statements, as individual ones, it's pretty easy to drop that table, just drop table the name. So I might just do that from the command prompt while I'm in development, rather than have those all as separate ones. Okay, so we've got several more here. Let's go ahead and bring them in one at a time. So let's go ahead and do that. Well, I'll do it. You can work along with me, or go ahead if you are faster than me. In the unlikely event that you can type better than I can. So this next dimension table then is the item table, and so that's essentially going to be the dimension for these items. Those items, these are the line items that an inspector is looking for, checking to make sure that there's no evidence of insects, no evidence of rodents. Each one of those would be a different line item that the inspector's doing, and that will be another dimension. So I'll name this one create item. And I will bring in that create table statement. Incidentally, if I wanted to, I could run these in parallel. I could have, once I've dropped the table, I can, there's no dependency for this item dimension. I can drop the tables and then spawn both of these simultaneously. So I don't have to pick between parallel or serial. I can mix and match. So my next one here is the result dimension. Okay. Next is the zip code. Here's the date dimension. My fact table. Finally to the fact table. Actually, there's two. I've got a fact table and I've got a fact temp table that we're going to be creating. So I may go ahead and do both of those in the same one. Okay, and that should be what it takes to get the structure of the data warehouse set up. We're going to create the fact table last because that fact table is going to have foreign keys that refer to these other dim tables out here. But the order of the rest of these doesn't matter, except the drop has to happen first. We want to execute that whole thing and make sure that it looks good. I've got some of these that I've disabled, so I'll re-enable those. And I'll run that. Go ahead.
You have to create zip code into the last one so that it makes sure it's run before.
Oh yeah, good point. Yeah, I probably should make sure that create zip code is getting run before create table, before I create my fact table. It's a really good idea. So what that means, I do have to serialize all of this. So I can't fork this one from here. Yeah, I don't think it'll let me. I don't think it'll let me do that. Yeah, maybe it'll let me do that. I'm not sure what it would mean to have that dependency that way. No, my question is, what I'm not sure about is what would happen if I left them in parallel but had the two pointing to it. I was surprised that it allowed me to do it. And so maybe it is smart enough to make sure those both. I mean, it makes sense. Do all this in parallel, make sure they all wait, and then. But really, whether that's what the semantics are or not, I don't know. I really want this to go all the way around. Well, I guess I'm just going to live with that being a little bit ugly. All right, so you should be able to run that multiple times and have it run through without error. And you can see them happening. You can see them happening in series. That's kind of nice. Okay, so any questions then on getting the structure set up? All right, so we're going to want another SSIS package. There's probably a way to create this. Right-click, New SSIS Package. And instead of being called Package 1, I will change the name to, maybe just Import Data. So I now have two different packages here that I can run independently of each other. So let's figure out what the first thing is. So we've got this create inspection type. So let's go ahead and do the inspection type first. All right, so we're done with the create script. Come back here and find Learning Suite and find my create tables, create DW. I sure hope I uploaded the right one. It didn't. Good news is I think I still have it open in my editor, so I can post it. Stand by. All right, so I'm going to open up this loaddw.txt file, and that will then give us the structured query language that it takes to create these different dimensions. So this first one is building the, this is building the establishment dimension. All right, we'll do the establishment dimension first. This is really a pretty complex query. And it would take most of the class period today to build this thing from scratch. It's really complex for a couple of reasons. One, these are not just primary key, foreign key pairs that you're seeing here, from establishment to license to business owner. And so there's quite a bit of collapsing that has to happen. What we have here is every license. When we think of a business license, we normally think of it, I've got my business license, and I've had this business license for 12 years. That's not the way that the city of Chicago looks at it. When they give you a business license, it's good for a year. And then there's a renewal process that you go through. And so what we actually have in the license table is every license that that establishment has ever had. And they actually have two numbers. They have what they refer to as license ID, which is the unique identifier for that yearly license. But then they have a license number that kind of spans. As long as you renew it, you maintain the same license number. And so the license number that's established here is kind of the one that the public thinks about as a license number. And then there's multiples of these. And then business owner is not just the one business owner who is the owner of the license, but it's every legal entity that is connected to that business. Who's the secretary? Who's the president? Who's on the board of directors? And so what this query is doing is it's looking at all of that. It's finding just the most recent license. It's finding the most prominent person in the list of owners and saying that's who we're going to identify as the owner, the one person that we're going to kind of aggregate the ownership to. And so that's what's happening with this query. I have no doubt that each of you could write this query given enough time. But it would take a while. What's that? I do have faith in you, yes. Question?
If they don't renew a license for a year, and they go back to the business, will they get a whole new license number?
So the question is, if they don't renew the license and it lapses, do they have to get a brand new one? And the answer is, I just don't know how Chicago does it. So my guess is, if it's lapsed for a week, no. There's probably some grace period, but if it goes too long, we'll say that license is dead. You want a license, start again. Because, it's a whole different set of paperwork to start a new license than it is to renew an existing. All right, so this is going to be then, and you'll notice this is a select statement. So the ones we did before, these are like modifying the database. This is going to be pulling records out, and so it's going to be a different kind of tool that we use. So I'll go ahead and copy that first select statement. And I'm on my import data package. And instead of using execute SQL, I'm going to use a data flow task. So I will double click the data flow task. That'll bring up a little wizard. Oh, it doesn't bring up the wizard. It brings up the item here. Oh, there'll be a wizard in just a moment. Okay, so I'm going to change the name here, and who are we doing on this? This is the establishment. So I'm going to call this import establishment. Now, when I double click it, it says, oh, this is a more complex thing, right? So when we're back here on our create DW, when I double click one of these, it says we're ready to configure. But when I double click a data flow task, it says, oh yeah, there's a lot more to do. So watch what happens. Here's the control flow tab of this task. There's a separate tab for data flow. So anytime I double click on any one of my data flow tasks, it just opens it in the second tab. And now that I'm here, I have two tools that will be very handy. One is my destination assistant and one's my source assistant. So let's start off with the source. So I'll double click my source assistant, and now it's going to say, all right, let's go ahead and get you connected onto a source. So our source type is going to be SQL Server. And, oh, it looks like I've got to establish the connections here again. That's interesting. Yeah, I wasn't expecting that. So let's see if I just click new if I can get there easily.
Yeah, you don't have to re-enter the data.
I'm not quite seeing where it is, though.
You have to right-click in the connection manager.
Down here? Oh, okay. I got to bring the connections in again here.
Yeah, you just have to tell it their status.
I'm trying to right-click. There we go. Okay, control flow. Let me come back to the beginning. Right-click, OLADB connection. Ah, and here they are. Okay, very good. So I'll bring in both of these. All right, now again, I'll double-click Import Establishment, and I'll double-click my Source Assistant. Okay, so here they are listed here now, and my source is over here, web.sql.byu.edu. So that's my source. Now I'm ready to configure the source end of this. So realize that I've got my control flow over here, import establishment, and now inside of that I have made this OLEDB source. And you could rename these, but all these that we're going to do, they're going to have a source and a destination. And so I'm not going to worry about changing the name here. But I'll double click it, which will allow me to configure this connection, this source. So it's already set up as my my connection here. And now I have a couple of options. I can either just refer to a table directly, or I can do a structured query language command. Or I can pull them in from a variable, which I do not know how to do. So let's go ahead and do a structured query language command. And so now I'm just going to paste that query in. And so this query now is the source for this action of moving data from one system to the other. And we'll say OK. Questions? This should be all we have to do. We established which connection we're using, put the query in, and that the source is ready. Second, we do the destination. So there's some grumbling. We need some help? Doing okay? All right, let's open up the destination assistant. Again, we're on SQL Server, but this one is going to be our data.websql.org. Should have your username there. Before I double-click the destination, I need this destination to know which source it's connecting to. So I'll click the source, and I will drag the blue arrow to the destination. The red arrow here is where it goes if you have an error, if it can't import a record. I'm not quite sure what I would ever do with that. I'm sure there's a very reasonable thing to do. I just don't know what to do with it. There's a question over here?
Yeah, I'm just getting an error when I try to do the source.
Okay, so folks, let's go ahead and, we're about to run this, but we'd like to be able to see that it actually works. It'll tell us it works, but we'd like to be able to see that it works. So there's a couple of ways we can do it. We can just go through the web interface to look at the destination, or we can use SQL Server Management Studio. Which one do you want to do? Web will be faster. SQL Server Management Studio will give us some exposure to SQL Server Management Studio. You got SQL Server Management Studio installed. You should go ahead and open it up. And let me get all my connections closed. And it should prompt you to connect it to something, which should look the same as if I click this connection right here. So you should be looking at something very similar to this. So we want to be able to look at our destination, and so that's going to be data.websql.org. You'll change to SQL Server Authentication, and you'll put in your credentials, username, and password. I can have multiple connections. In this Management Studio, I can have multiple connections open at once. So I can have one open my source, one on my destination, one somewhere else. And I should be able to navigate through this set. So go to Databases, User Data, and Tables. This is SQL Server Management Studio now. You want to get connected to the destination. That's what we're checking. It turns out on this server, I did something that probably wasn't the smartest thing I've ever done. I made over 200,000 user accounts, just in case I might need them someday. And it makes listing objects take a long time because it has to look through a bunch of places to see, are there any objects here? I think that's what it's taking. I think that's why it takes so long. So this is kind of listing these tables is an abnormally long thing to do. And then it says, yeah, there's not that many, but it took us a while to look and see what there was. Okay, so I'm just going to scroll down to where I've got my, the ones that belong to my user, and there should be this dim establishment table. I can right-click that table, I think. Do I have to expand it? It shouldn't take too terribly long. I should be able to right-click that table and ask how many records there are in it. And it could be that server is just, with 40 of you trying to list those tables, it could just be bogged down right now. Yes? I don't remember. I think I used the default. And yeah, definitely SQL Server Authentication. Okay, so I should be able to right-click, say select top 1,000 rows, and that should just put a query here that would select that and run that, and shows me there's currently no data in it, right? We've created a table, but we haven't run the script that enters it. So I'm expanding down from the user data database, set of tables, finding the table that I want, dim establishment, right-click it, and choose show top 1,000 rows. Yeah, and again, unfortunately, the way I've configured this server, it's breathing pretty heavy right now. So yeah, all the way from connecting. Are you connected?
Yes.
So connecting. So here's how you connect. It prompts you to connect when you first open it. If you're not prompted, then you've got a button right here that will help you connect. Click on that, and it says, "All right, what do you want to connect?" Yeah. Server type is the default. Database engine. I've never changed that ever. I don't even know what else there is to choose from. Oh, analysis services. Yeah, we're gonna do that next week, maybe. So server name data.websql.org. You'll change authentication to SQL Server Authentication, and then you'll put in your credentials from your database textbook account. These are the ones I emailed to you. And I always say remember password because that's a password I can't ever remember on my own. Then say connect, and that should show you something that looks about like, probably shouldn't have collapsed that. It should give you a set of databases which you can expand. I'm finding the one called user data, expanding that. And then I'm coming to the set of tables and expanding that. And that might take a minute or more. Oh, really? Is it just timed out? It turns out we don't really need to list the tables. So we can bypass the list the tables part just by coming here. Once you're on the database, you can just say new query here on this button right here. And we can just type that query in our cells. It's a pretty simple query. Select. Select star from dim. What's it called? Establishment. And we should just be able to execute. Oh, let's see. It doesn't know that this. It doesn't realize this query is on that database. So hold on a second. I want to make sure that this query is already connected to that database. So I'm on the database called user data. Maybe I should right click and say new query or something. Anyway, there's another option to get there.
The drop down you put right underneath, it's grayed out right now, but that's where you change the database.
So I'm already on user data, so that looks pretty good. Or if I choose, what's that? I don't think so. But if I right click the database and say new query, that should be connected to that. It should be connected to that database. I can then type select star from dim establishment and execute that. So what's taking a long time here is to figure out what tables are available to me, and I think it's because there's hundreds of thousands of users it has to look through. Anyway, the whole point here is just to be able to see there's no data in that table. Believe me, if you haven't seen it yet, believe me, there's no data. Okay. So now we've configured this data flow with a source query, and we've configured the destination. But we're not quite ready to, I don't think we have configured the destination yet. We configured the source, we made the destination, and we hooked it up. So let's now go ahead and configure the destination. All right. And again, we're going to be listing tables. So I'm going to quick list tables before you do. So I get there first. So this is connected up to our data.websql. This is our destination database. And so we've got to pick a table that we want to push this data to in that destination. And so again, here it's listing it. It'd be really nice if we could just type it in, but we can't. We've got to choose it from the list. So all I've done is I haven't changed anything from the default except coming in here and click the download, or click the down arrow here. And that should give me the same list of tables that I saw in SQL Server Management Studio. So I should be able to come down here and find dim establishment. And so what I'm saying is, here's the connection that was already established. We're going to look at a view, a table or view, the table. Good thing it's fast load. I'm not sure how long slow load would take. And then I pick dim establishment. So this is where I'm pushing the data to. Right? I've got the source over here. We set up where it's coming. And now we're saying where it's going. All this does is it tells us which table we're trying to push it to. We haven't told it which columns we want to map to. That's the next step. And I'm guessing some of you are still waiting to be able to choose dim establishment. Is that right? Yep. Okay, so let's take a second and let that come in. Or a minute or more. Yeah, we're still recording. That's the pause button in case I want to pause. Okay, so once I've established the table that I'm going to push this data to, the next step is to come right here to mappings. So here under mappings, hello mappings, that shouldn't take a while. I guess it will take a while. Okay, so now on the destination, it's saying, look, I know which source I'm coming from, and so it lists the source here, and it says, here's what's available in the destination. And if the field name was exactly the same, it says, great, I'll just connect that up. If the field name's different, it's not going to connect it up. So these field names look pretty good, except for up here we have an establishment ID. That's the name of the primary key in the business table. And I've created a column called establishment ID, which is going to be the primary key that I'm using in the data warehouse, but it's going to be self-generating. If we look back at the query, we'll see that it's an auto-increment, what's it called, an identity column. And so this one comes up wrong because, well, the column names are both the same. It doesn't realize I'm trying to map the establishment ID to the establishment ID bus, the business identifier. So I'll just delete that connection and then drag it over again to get it correct. And so now I've got these connected the way I want them connected. Any questions here? I only changed one field mapping. So that was to make sure the establishment ID from my source was going to the establishment ID bus field. So how do you make the new line? The answer is you have to first delete the existing one. So click on it and then delete, and then you should just be able to click, drag, and drop. Oh, really? Yeah. You are absolutely right, my son. We should say OK, and now this data step is configured. Whew. That's one, and there's like 12 of them. They're all pretty much the same. That's the good news. Okay, so let's go ahead and get one more in place, and then we'll run them so we can kind of see the series of it happen. So I'm going to come back to my control flow tab, Remember that I'm on the data flow tab. I'm down one level into my script. So I'll come back to my control flow tab, and I'm going to do another. We don't really have time to see another kind, so let's do another import. Hopefully the next one on our list is the same kind. Yeah, it's even simpler. So this is just looking at the inspection type. Okay, so I'm going to copy this data flow task, and I will rename it. Come back to me. Hey. Maybe I'll rename it later. We'll take a look at the source. I may not do anything else today. What's going on? All those clicks I remembered. I guess I'll rename it now. So this is going to be import. What was it? This is going to be import inspection type. All right, let's set up the source for this one. So I'll double click my source, and I will use the next query from our set of queries to bring the data over. So we're just summarizing the different inspection types. Say OK. My source is configured. Now I'll configure my destination, hopefully. Sometimes it does not have to re-ask for the whole list. But apparently that now is not one of those times. We're going to push this now to the temp, because we created several tables for this one. We created a dim inspection type, and we created a temp inspection type. This is going to go into the temp inspection type. So we're going to bring that data in, and then we're going to take a look at it, and we'll run some activities to push it where we want it to go. Okay, so this should go to temp inspection type. Temp inspection type. And that's the one. We'll then go to our mappings, so we can map from the source to the destination. The count is going to go to count. Inspection type will go to inspection type description. And name is not a field. The name is just the header for this, the column. So that should be okay. Didn't what? It's telling me these are the names of the fields. So name's not connectable even if I tried. All right, I'm going to go back to control flow. I'll connect these two up together. We'll import the establishment. We'll import the inspection type. And I'll go ahead and run that. What's the question? Okay. So, this doesn't quite look like it's running. I'm not sure if it's just waiting because the server is a little bit loaded right now.
Oh yeah, mine just started up.
Yours finally just started.
Yeah, just give it a little bit.
So that should go through. And is yours finished yet?
Mine's still running.
So I mean, it is that first query is pretty intense, and so it's going to take a minute to be able to go through. Yeah. All right, folks, we did not get nearly as far as I had hoped. Let me tell you what my plan is for next week. A week from next week, we have the courseware developer from DataStax coming to introduce us to Cassandra. So it turns out DataStax, there are like 3 commercial distributions of Cassandra. Cassandra's open source. There's always companies that grow up and say, we're going to give you a better experience than you can get just by working with the open source. Pay us money and we'll help. The biggest one of those for Cassandra is a company called DataStax. They're located, their headquarters is in Dallas. Their courseware developer lives in Harem. And so he's going to come and actually teach us how to work with Cassandra. He wants me to get you started before he comes. So you're not starting from ground zero when he comes. And so that's what next week is for. We've got 2 days next week. We've got to finish data warehousing. That will be Monday. And then we've got to start Cassandra, which will be Wednesday. And basically, we're spending March on NoSQL. So it will be Cassandra and Cassandra. All going to be Cassandra. Because they're going to come and teach it. So he'll be here at least 4 days, and I'll be helping out. So, yeah, I'm not sure if we can finish this off on Monday as far as we got today. So we're going to have to. So we're going to get as far as we can with data warehousing on Monday, and then we're moving to NoSQL. Questions? All right. Thanks for coming. I will see you next week.